you got the correct answer or not. This is a class assignment. So just stop.
इस एग्जाम का वेटेज क्या है? इस एग्जाम का वेटेज क्या है?
Equal distribution is there. Best 3 out of 4.
Best 3 out of 4.
Classes. Okay, so we were discussing राहुल फटाफट करो. So we were discussing the pollution permits regime, and we discussed it through some examples. Like I mentioned that in Singapore there are limited number of plates, and if you have to buy a car, first you have to buy the car number. Means you have to purchase the number plate, maybe through auctioning process, the government auctioning process, or maybe from a private party who is willing to sell it. So this permit system, how it works, very easy to understand. So I took the example of thermal power plants with equal capacity, and we discussed the example that if there are SO2 emission from these thermal power plants, then the total emission is to be fixed, that need to be converted into permits, and then permits. So again we can understand this. Let's say this is MCC1 and this is MCC2. Means two companies having different kind of control cost. Okay, so this is, let's say, 0 to 1000. So total emission is 1000, and the permits given to them, the total emission allowed is also 1000. Just to make it more easy, so total emission from two firms is 2000, for example, and the government decides that they will issue just 200. They allow only 1000 units emission. Okay, so following the rule of fairness, what they will do? They will equally distribute. So what does it mean? So both the firms together are allowed to emit 1000 units. How much they are generating? They are generating 1000 each. The total emission generation is 2000 units. But they are allowed to emit only 1000 units. So government authorities what they do? They allow each of them to emit 500 units. It's okay? So equal distribution is, and this is they do through permit system. So 1 unit, let's say, can become 1 permit. Depends. I mean, it can be anything. It can be 10 units is equal to 1 permit, like that. But let's say 1 unit is equal to 1 permit. So that means there are total how many permits are available? 1000 permits are available with government authorities. Okay, let's say in our case, Central Pollution Control Board. Now, what they will do? They will sell 500 to company 1 and 500 to company 2. And this is the situation. So 500 is somewhere here, right? So what is happening? This is MCC, this is equilibrium cost, MCC Q1, or this is MCC 2Q, not actually Q, but okay, anything is right. 2P, 1P, right? So this is the solution initially. So company 1 says they have got efficient system available with them, maybe efficient production system, maybe efficient treatment technology is available with them. So their marginal control cost for controlling 500 unit is this, correspondingly this one. The other unit, which is not having that efficient production system or that efficient technology, so they will be having this marginal cost. Okay, let's say this is 2000 and this is 500. What does it mean? If company 1 decide to control 1 unit further, so instead of using 500 permit, they decide to use 499. So they will be spending extra amount. So they will be just spending, let's say 510 rupees for controlling that unit, which is lower than what company 2 is spending, right? So now this is a situation. If they are allowed to exchange their permits, if permits are made tradable, then what will happen? Instead of investing or instead of spending operational cost in controlling the pollution, company 2 would like to buy a permit from company 1, and company 1 is ready to sell it, because again there will be negotiation, they can always bargain. So they are just spending 510, but they can talk to this company and say that okay, I can sell you this in 1000 rupees. Just hypothetically I am saying. So this is a win-win situation for both, because this company is gaining around 500 rupees, 490 rupees is a gain for company 1, and company 2 is also gaining because their control cost for this unit was 200 rupees, and now they are just spending 1000 rupees, right? So this is how permit system works. So I gave you example of annex. So at a global level, this all started through clean development mechanism. So during late 90s, there was a Kyoto Protocol. So we will have classes on that. So basically, there is a mechanism or the global mechanism for the negotiation of different issues, and it is known as Conference of Parties. Means different countries they meet and then negotiate on various issues. So for climate change also there is a convention being organized almost every year, exceptionally 1 or 2 years it didn't happen, which is known as COP, Conference of Parties on Climate Change. It's known like that. So till last year, it was 26th Conference of Parties. So Kyoto Protocol is the protocol which was adopted in one COP. I don't remember the number, but this convention happened, or this Conference of Parties happened in Kyoto, Japan. That's why, and the resolution which was taken in this Kyoto COP is known as Kyoto Protocol, and this Kyoto Protocol came up with an idea of clean development mechanism. So what they did, they divided countries into 3 groups. So the first group was Annex 1 countries. So there was an annexer. And who were these countries? These were the developed countries. So basically the whole idea of this protocol was to reduce the greenhouse gas emissions. See, how will you control, or how will you tackle the climate change? So now we know that one of the major reasons for climate change is emission of greenhouse gases, right? So what you have to do? You have to reduce the greenhouse gas emission, and this reduction in greenhouse emission is based on certain studies. So you must have heard about IPCC report, Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. So they come out with the reports. So what they do? They make certain projections. So first projection will be, if business is as usual, means there is no control on emission, then what will be the emission, what will be the projection till 2015 or 2000 or 2100, and what will be the temperature change, right? Then they build scenarios. So if greenhouse emission is controlled by this quantity, so how they say, so suppose today there is a total global emission is, let's say, 100 ton of greenhouse gas emission are emitted, 100 ton. So they will consider this year as a base year, and they will say that by so we are in 2024, so they will make a target that by 2034 we will reduce it to 50%. Means by 2034 the global emission of greenhouse gases will be 50 tons. You understand this? So this is how they work. So they set the target with respect to the base year. By this year we will reduce emission by this much of amount. Okay. So similar kind of discussion happened. Similar type of targets were set during this Kyoto COP. Now, just setting the target is not going to help, because who is going to implement it? Let's say UN says that globally we will reduce the emission by 50%. But if they do not come up with any action plan, who is going to do it? Again, it is a common property. So no nation will take the lead, not even the most prosperous nations. They will not take any lead in this. So the Kyoto Protocol came up with some mechanism, and that is known as clean development mechanism. Although this protocol is not in action in the present scenario, but it worked very well for maybe more than a decade. So Annex 1 countries were the countries, those who were developed countries. So as per the Kyoto Protocol, targets were given to them for the reduction of greenhouse gas emissions. Okay, we will term them GHG emission. Okay. Then there is another group of countries, mostly developing countries. So developing countries, they said that in fact we will be emitting more. behind in the development, and when we will be taking up the development projects, we will be consuming more fossil fuel. In the process, we will be emitting more. So, don't say anything for about the reduction of GHG emission. Rather, we will be increasing it. So, of course, I am not going into that detail, what targets were given to them, but it was realized that by the proponents of the Kyoto Protocol, it was realized that one, NX1 countries have very great difficulty in emission reduction. Why? Because they are already working with very advanced or state-of-the-art technologies. So, suppose today we decide to go for another level of automobile. Today we are operating with BS6. Now suppose we decide that further emission control should happen. So from BS6 to BS7 or BS8, it's not easy, because already you are using the state-of-the-art technology. There will be research, then we'll come up with some new material for engines and so on. So they all realize that NX1 countries, they are already using state-of-the-art technologies for production, for emission control. So it won't be easy for them to meet the targets. And targets were very stringent. Okay, for example, within 10 years you have to reduce your GHG emission by 20%. How it is possible? Only by two ways. One, reduce the consumption. Two, improve the or go for advancement in technology or in the production system. Consumption reduction, you just forget the way our economies are working. In fact, consumption will increase. You talk about any economy, per capita consumption is going to increase. So that is ruled out. The next is invest in technologies, but then it will take time. So what is the way out? So another point they realize that developing countries, two things they realize about developing countries. One, that these countries are lagging behind, so they are bound to have more emission in future. But at the same time, they also understood that the technology which these countries are using is obsolete technology. So there is a huge scope of improvement. See how it works. So let's say in a particular sector, you need you decide to start one company or one factory, one industry. Then you need machines, you need technology. So one way is that you go to the market, purchase state-of-the-art machines and install them. But for that you need huge money. So what entrepreneurs in developing countries they do, they purchase scrap machines. What does it mean? Scrap machines are the machines which are actually running, but they are based on obsolete technology. They are from the older generation of production system. Right? So scrap does not mean that it is sold as scrap. So technology is obsolete. Since the efficiency is low, industry which is located in developed countries, they have stopped using this technology. So they are not using this machinery anymore. They have already installed a new plant. Now, entrepreneurs in developing countries, they buy this machine because they feel that because the cost is very low, it is functioning well, and within their production structure, they are able to compete. Okay, because all entrepreneurs in this sector, within their country, they are using almost the same generation of production system. Right? So this is how it happens. So they realize that developing countries have a huge scope, but they will not be doing any investment because there are no targets given to them. Okay? So they created a mechanism. They allowed Annex 1 countries to buy permits from developing countries. So like this, permits were distributed. So India was given certain permits, Japan was given certain permits, and permits were given based on the current emissions. Okay. So now, suppose India is given 1000 permits, and by investing in conservation measures, India could save as a whole 100 permits. Means they are just using 900 permits. And remember, this reduction in permits or use of permit should be based on technological advancement. Should not be based on stopping the production. So that is also possible. So instead of reducing, you just reduce your production and then you reduce the permit use. So that is not correct. So you have to invest in technology, conservation measures. So there are 2-3 conditions. One was that you cannot reduce your production. 2, this should not be the part of regular compliance of your country. So beyond that, if you take any measure and reduce the consumption of permit, then like for example in this case, you have 100 permits surplus. So now you go to the market, international market, say that we have 100 permits available. Anyone want to buy, they can buy. So the other party, the Annex 1 countries, they are buying these permits and they are using these permits to achieve their targets. Okay? Right. So, for example, if a country like Japan, they were giving permits. Initially, they were emitting equivalent to let's say 1500 permits. Now, with the target, they were giving only 1400 permits. So, what they can do? They will buy these 100 permits. Still, they are emitting 1500. So this 1500 is 1400 allotted to them plus 100 permits purchase. So they need not to reduce the production. They can plan their strategy better. By the time they invest in R&D, in a new technology, they are allowed to. So this is how permit system works. Any question in this? Okay. So what we are doing in this transferable permit operation? What are the postulates? 1, legally sanctioned right to pollute, same as it was in pollution tax regime. Permits are clearly defined. When I say clearly defined, that means the emission for which permits are being issued, that can be easily measured. Just for example, can we issue permit for individual users? Like, can we issue permits for cars? I am talking about emission. No, not possible, because monitoring is difficult. So if monitoring is difficult, you cannot define the permit very clearly. Okay. Who is going to decide about the size and how this is going to be distributed? Authorities, government. Because they are making the policy. They know how much to control and how much to release. Number 1. Distribution also they have to take a call. We will discuss more on distribution. Then 4th, if someone is emitting more than the permit, then heavy penalty. So you need to have a deterrent, otherwise it won't work. Suppose in this case, if this industry does not have, so there must be, so they are ready to buy permit from industry 1 only when penalty on them is more than 2000 rupees. If you pollute 1 unit extra, they should face penalty at minimum 2000. Or say, let's say 5000. Then only they will be forced to buy from the markets. If there is no penalty, then they won't bother. Why would they spend money? So, right. And the last is, there should be a free trading. Like a free market mechanism, there should be free trading in the marketplace. Okay. Let us talk about next part. The first thing, when we start a permit system, the first thing comes to our mind is a determination of permits. The volume, the size. So here, for example, total emission of two industries was 2000. We decided that we will issue only 1000 permits. So this is a very meticulous exercise to be performed by government authorities. Because if you issue large number of permits, so suppose in this case total number of emission is equivalent to 2000 units, and if I decide to give or issue, let's say 1900 permits or very close to 2000 permit, what will happen? It will be ecologically or environmentally disastrous decision. Why? Because there is no incentive for both the firms to control any pollution. Why would they control? Right? So, determination of permit is a very important exercise. And extensive understanding is needed, especially on the side of regulatory bodies. Number 2, permits, number of permits. It is nothing like a fixed number. So suppose today government decides to issue 1000 permits. Next year, if they feel that it is affecting the environment badly, they will recall. They may recall 200 permits. Then say, okay, 1000 permit what we issued last year, they are too much. Let's recall 200 permits back in the system. Right? So allocation initially is done after a very rigorous exercise, and then revisiting of permits is done regularly. Okay, but the whole idea is that number of permits should stop the abuse to the environment, right? Okay, so first thing is number of permits. Now the distribution, how to distribute them. So one idea we just saw here, last class also we saw, we are distributing them equally. Our assumption was the firm size was same, so we distributed them equally. Okay. What can be the other ways? There can be different ways. So one of the way can be we do the assessment of technology, and according to the technology we can distribute. So suppose in this case we distribute more permits to firm 2 and less permit to firm 1, because firm 1 is, but again whatever call you take, one party will be affected. So now in this case, if we are not distributing them equally, firm 1 will say that it is not fair to me. But then any call you take as far as initial distribution is concerned, so there will be initial resentment. However, market will reach to the optimum value. Okay. After the negotiation, they will reach to this optimal solution. Right. But then, yes, when we start another way of distributing permit can be based on the size. But again, that is kind of equal distribution. Okay. So, what do you see when I say the first postulate, legal sanctioned right to pollute? It is equivalent to what? You remember quotient theory? When we were giving the rights to individual party, it's similar to that. So, in quotient theorem, in quotient procedure, we were giving rights to one individual. But here we are distributing rights to all polluters. Okay? So, it is very close to. Now, let us talk about positives and negatives. What are the positives? In almost all previous methodologies, the problem was if number is more, it becomes more and more difficult. If you look at all legal procedures. But in this case, more the numbers, better it works. Why? Because it is a market system. Negotiation will take place. So now if there are only two firms, so only one firm is negotiating with, so only firm number 2 is negotiating with firm number 1. But if there are more firms, then 2, 3, 4, 5, they all will be negotiating with firm 1, and it will be very beneficial for firm 1. Okay. So for example, if in case of two parties, if firm 2 is a hard negotiator, so they will not agree on 1000 rupees. They'll say we'll just buy in 600 rupees. Otherwise, leave it. Because they are the hard bargainers. So then maybe firm 1 realizes that okay, in any case we are gaining 90 rupees per unit. Let's sell it. But if there are more number of players in market, it will be a kind of free market thing. So firm 2 will be bidding for it, firm 3 will be bidding for it, and then they will be, right? So it works better if number of players are more. Once the permits are decided and distributed, invisible hands actually start working. All mainstream economists or neoclassical economists, they favor it. Obviously, because it is very close to their market theory, right? However, administrative and transaction cost is high, right? And of course, here also we need to have very accurate information about damage cost, because then only authorities will be able to decide on the right number of permits. Okay. Now, there are certain challenges. What are those challenges? Number 1, related to distribution. So, different mechanism of distribution, as I mentioned, 1 is equal distribution, 2 in the proportion of the size of the firm, 3 historical emissions, 4 distribution by lottery, 5th public auction, right? In all these issues, there will be certain challenges. Okay. If you go by historical level of pollution, then it is favoring polluters. If you are not giving them more permits, then fair chance is there that this firm will close the operation, because they will be allotted very less number of permits, and it will be economically disaster for them, because they have to purchase permits from the market. So it's very difficult to say that. So this is one problem. That distribution always creates a problem. Second, do you feel that no one will abuse the permit? There is a very interesting case study in US. Although it's a positive case study, but it was a misuse of permit system. So what happened when this permit system US used for controlling or for improving the air quality. So what they did, they did it for they implemented this permit system in their clean air program. Okay, so they decided on permits for thermal power plants. Okay, they did some calculation. Some of the permits they issued directly. Some of the permits they did auction. Okay, so like I mentioned in the last class. Now the permits, those who were auctioned, were bought by school children, a particular group of school children. Of course, they got this money from crowdfunding. So they made an appeal. So large number of people gave them the fund. And this school children, this particular school, used those funds to buy these permits. Now what school will be doing with the permits? What was the purpose? Any guess?
Maybe sell it at higher value.
What they will do with that money? So they decided to waste those permits. The whole idea was, the kids decided that let us improve the quality. So government has issued X number of permit. Let's not allow thermal power plant to use all these permits. Buy some and waste them. So from the environmental point of view, they were doing good. And they got a lot of funding because it was a good cause, social cause for the environment, and especially who is doing that? School kids. So it was a huge appeal. It had a huge appeal and a lot of funds came to them, and they bought and they wasted. But from the market point of view, so the economists, they are favoring this permit system because it is close to free market. But this is abuse to the free market space. Now in this case, in this particular case, it is happening for the good cause. But it can happen differently. For example, there are two competitors. So one competitor can buy more permits. They are operating in the market for a longer duration. They have huge backing, huge money. There is another firm came in their competition. Firm 1 decided to throw them out of the market by purchasing or by giving higher price to the permits. They are not using it, but many times it actually, there are examples like in the school case example, it actually helped. How? During the disintegration of USSR, economies of various countries in Central Asia, their production system all got affected. But what they received permits based on their historical emissions. So under the Kyoto Protocol, so they were allotted permits much higher than they were producing. They also used it for selling it at a very low cost. So it was a kind of, again, abuse. They were not able to produce. That is why they were not able to, but they use this to sell to other countries and at a low price. So there are possibilities of abuse. Okay, you need to deal with these kind of abusive practices. Morally and ethically, of course, no one can defend it. But the only defense one can present is that our ultimate goal is to abate the pollution, control the pollution. And see, when we discussed other mechanisms, we always said that there is no incentive for firm to control the pollution. But here they have incentive to not only to control but to prevent pollution. Why? I mean, how? See, I have 500 permits with me. I want to sell more and more permits in the market. How can I do that? Number one, by controlling the pollution. Number two, by reducing the pollution. So even by reducing the pollution, I will be able to sell more permits, or I will be able to bring more permits in the market. So, although ethically what we are saying that you have a right to pollute, this is how it looks like. But ultimately, our aim is to control or to abate pollution. And this we are able to do it through the market. We are getting economic incentive for both, for controlling as well as reducing the pollution or preventing the pollution. So, practically, it is good to see, good to implement this scheme. Right? Ecologists, they criticize, they say that you are selling pollution as a commodity. That's fine, but as I mentioned that something good is happening through the market mechanism. So, and that is why this mechanism became so popular that, so I mentioned that Gujarat state, they are starting a pilot on, of course, on air emissions. Now, many countries are working on good sensors, especially for water pollution, so that this pollution permit also can be brought in controlling the water pollution. Because one of the challenge is the monitoring. Okay, until and unless there is a monitoring. So one case study already I mentioned, this United States case study where I discussed this case of school kids. They bought the permits. Okay, so it actually started in US in mid 70s, right? And this was part of their air quality program. They phased out leaded gasoline with this, so they control the permits of lead, which was coming out with the emissions from leaded gasoline. Okay, so they issue these permits to the refineries. Okay, it worked very well. Then another example is phasing out of ozone depleting chlorofluorocarbons. So very interestingly, you see, if you just follow the discussion on global warming and COP, two major countries are considered as a culprit. Who are these two countries? US and China. They are not agreeing to the right? Okay, but in case of ozone, probably another fellow will be discussing on these issues in the global environmental pollution. So, in case of ozone depleting chlorofluorocarbons, do we use chlorofluorocarbons anymore? No, all is phased out. I mean, I am not talking about illegal markets. Legally, chlorofluorocarbons are not being used. Okay. So what happened in late 80s? European countries, US, Canada, they started facing problem due to the ozone hole or depletion of ozone in stratosphere. So there was sudden increase in the cases of skin cancer and other problems. And finally it was linked to the higher concentration of UV radiation and finally to the depletion of ozone in the stratosphere. And then they decided to control the emission of ozone depleting substances including chlorofluorocarbon. And this is one of the programs. So whatever programs you see at global level, whether it is UN's peacekeeping operation, whether it is any program related to environmental conservation or anything, you see that none of the programs are giving the due results. See, for so long UN agencies are crying, they are begging in front of Ukraine and Russia. Any result? No. Both are continuing fighting. All agencies are begging in front of Palestine and Israel. Any result? No. Same is true with environmental problems also. If you see acid rain control program, almost all developed countries in the beginning, they refuse to participate. They refuse to take responsibilities, and the same thing is happening with global warming. US is not ready to take responsibility. China is not ready to take responsibility. India was also not taking, but now India has decided to take responsibility. Although we have our own logic, and we are right. So today's global warming problem is because of whom? It is not because of India, it is not because of Brazil, it is not because of even China. It is because of historical emissions. So global GHG emission which is happening today is not causing global warming. Global warming, whatever has happened, it is because of the historical emission which has come from the developed countries like US. But they are not owning it. But interestingly, in case of ozone depleting substances, they acted very fast. In fact, if the targets were set for 10 years to reduce certain amount of ozone depleting substances, those targets were achieved not only well within time, but in many cases 50% of the time. So for example, if the target time was 10 years, they achieved those targets by 5 years. And then again they had another convention, they decided to go for more stringent norms. And 10 years before the plan, globally we phased out ozone depleting substances. And of course, US is one of the very successful program which was implemented through the permit system. Successful why? Because very efficiently, very low economic value because of the permit system. One of the very good case study. Of course, success belongs to this permit system, but success also belongs to another reason, that is US was facing the brunt, or the developed countries were facing the brunt. It was directly affecting their population. Acid rain, they were not first facing the. So, US emitting acid rain precursor gases. Who is facing the brunt? Who is Canada? Because it is a transboundary pollution system and pollutant flows like this, that they are crossing the boundary and getting precipitated in Canada. So Canada is crying, US is saying that no, I have no concern. Same in Europe. Central European countries or Southern European countries like France, Germany, they were polluting. Who was facing the problem? Scandinavian countries in the north. So wind flows like this, right? UK, they were not bothered because they are UK is the island country. So neither they are receiving any acid precursor gases, nor they are. So, I mean, this discussion went in another direction. But what I am trying to say that ozone depleting fluorocarbon, US implemented this successfully. Acid control, whatever US did, success belongs to permit system. So I mentioned that example. SO2 control with thermal power plant. Okay. Maybe you can see these case studies. Now we will start the next topic, that is the environmental valuation. So, and based on this valuation of environment, your assignment 2, you have to perform assignment 2. I do not know whether ReDeLe has uploaded assignment 2 or not, but we have decided that we will put them before your mind. So assignment 2 will be based on field work. So we will be giving you some sites within Delhi NCR. So there will be two kind of assignments. One, scenario building, where you have to go to these sites, get the data related to flora, fauna, take good photographs, environmental amenities you have to capture. Right? Few assignments will be based on, so similar to you, earlier batch, they also did some assignment. So in few assignments, I will share their work. You have to supplement that work. Maybe you have to add more information, number one. Number two, based on their information, you have to do the monetization of that. So for example, what does it mean? So for example, let's say Lodi garden. So suppose you will be getting the scenario of the Lodi garden, flora, fauna, area, how many people are coming, all that. Now you have to use that information and convert or create a monetary value for Lodi garden. So that is what is called valuation of environment, not evaluation. It is valuation. Valuation means we are converting environmental amenity into economic valuation. You suppose you saw a peacock dancing. Now what we will be doing? We will be converting this peacock dancing in terms of money. So someone says that today I saw peacock dancing. So another one, your friend has missed that. Suppose he reaches to that same point maybe a few seconds later. So can we convert this feeling in terms of money? Right? So that kind of proposition is this. So economic valuation of environmental amenities, okay, or environment. So anyway, today we cannot continue. Thank you. Can we have an extra class before minor on Saturday? Online? No. You? Saturday. Okay. Saturday is working. Okay. So maybe after minor.
नहीं हो रहा है
I think I just need one extra class. Thank you.
हिमांशु बैठ
अरे फिर आप आप यहाँ पे यहाँ पे ये वाला आना है आपको, ये वाला इसके बाद कंप्लीट सर
वो चीज़ कंप्लीट है, वो अगला सेमेस्टर पूरा एक्सटेंड हुए ना।
अच्छा है।
तो ये सेमेस्टर 3 क्रेडिट था, बाकी वो चीज़ उठाया मैंने, 12 क्रेडिट तो भरने पड़ेंगे ना।
अब भी बस ये आरडी के चक्कर में बीटी हो गई।
लेने जमीन फिफ्थ सेमेस्टर था ना, फिफ्थ सेमेस्टर ही मेरा हट गया था ना पूरा।
अच्छा पूरा ही हट गया था।
तो इवन सेमेस्टर में आता ना, और में कुछ लैब भी बची हुई है, तो लैब तो टीम उठा रखी है, तो ये खाली 12 क्रेडिट तो उठाने पड़ेंगे। तो ये उठा दिया, अभी एक सर उठा दिया ग्रेड बढ़ाने के लिए, रिप्लेस करने के लिए।
समझ रहा हूँ।
तो ग्रुप में आ गया, कितनी भी ग्रुप होनी चाहिए, 4 की।
4
तुम लोग को
UVS कोर्स UVS कोर्स
मतलब ये किसी बात कर रहा था, किसी आर्टिस्ट की बात कर रहा था।
अच्छा
कितने जनों का ग्रुप बनाना है वैसे?
4 मुरादी हो गया,
कौन?
मुरादी है
कार्तिक, अच्छा हाँ मुरादिया। अरे वो सौरभ भी है,
सौरभ है।
हाँ सौरभ का भी है। बस तो फिर
ऐड करने का
ऐड करना कहाँ है, कुछ मेरे को भी नहीं पता है कुछ।
ए माचू माचू
ऐड किधर, मतलब कहीं नहीं करना ऐड।
बना के ला
हाँ बस बना लो।
कोई ऐड नहीं करता, कोई ऐड
कहीं नहीं करना ना, सीधा असाइनमेंट करके सबमिट करना है। हम भी जाएंगे प्रोग्राम बना के लिए ईयर बार
लोरा कौन है?
ईयर बार चलेंगे क्या है
लोरा अभी तो टाइम है।
हमारे के बाद ही होना चाहिए।
हाँ मैं 3 तारीख के बाद ही करूँगा सारे काम। इधर टीम को तो पॉसिबल नहीं है, 17 के बाद, 17 अक्टूबर के बाद।
क्यों?
17 तो हफ्ते तो ऐसे ग्रेड वर्क कराऊंगा, फिर 7 एक्टिव
तो
आपको
हम कर देंगे, कोई नहीं रहना पड़ा देंगे का दिक्कत है।
करेगा कैसे? मेरे पास एक्सपीरियंस मुझे कार्ड नहीं था, मेरे पास कार्ड था,
हमको बता देता ना, हम
चारों को नहीं है, हम 17 मेजर तक है ना,
मेजर से चलना है।
ये प्रो एग्जाम लिख चलेगा भाई मैं तो मुझे पढ़ रहा था, पढ़ के करने को दिया, बंदे कर दिया, इतना भी चीज़
तेरी क्लास आज की क्लास होगी सारी है।
हाँ
में अपडेट हो रहा है कि आपको रन भी नहीं करता है, रिस्टार्ट होता है ना। मेरे को उनका शौक आ रहा है कि चलिए मैं सीखा। हाँ? आपको अरे नहीं ना। दस मिनट बता रहा था। किस में नहीं कह रहा है?
सारे के